Today, we're welcoming Sara Codarin. She's an architect, an educator at Lawrence Tech College or University College of Architecture and Design. Her research spans robotic fabrication, large-scale additive manufacturing, digital craft, computational workflows, and generative AI for world building. She holds a master's in architecture and a Ph.D. from the University of Ferrara, where she focused on robotics for cultural heritage preservation. Her collaborative work on artificial intelligence was selected for the 2025 Biennale Architettura in Venice, curated by Carlo Ratti. She has exhibited her work at Pratt Institute of School of Architecture, Detroit Month of Design, and Milan Design Week. Sara is a techno-optimist and she loves robots. So thank you, Sara.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's good to see you all. I see so many familiar faces. I'm super excited. I should specify I'm licensed in Italy, but I'm associate AIA. Just want to make sure I don't get fined for this. Let me share my screen. Let me see, actually, give me 1 second. Actually, I did that mistake again. I should share the sound as well. Okay, can you see everything all right? Fantastic. So thanks so much. I'm super excited. It's good to see you all. I'm currently in Italy, leading a workshop focused on artificial intelligence and urban regeneration. So I'll share some of the very, very recent work with you today. And I'm very excited really to start a conversation. What I want to focus on tonight is really a discourse around artificial intelligence as a creative collaborator in the context of teaching, for sure. As an educator, it's kind of like a main concern, or like even like excitement to think about how to interact with these incredible tools that have emerged in the last couple of years, at least for a wide audience. And so the question is like how to accept this kind of evolution in computational tools and how to really leverage them in the creative process. So yes, Chris mentioned my background. I'm Italian. I come from the University of Ferrara. I spent some time thinking about restoration and innovative way of thinking about how to take care of the collective cultural heritage. And I've been always interested in thinking about modes, methods, and techniques to innovate culture, like a cultural approach in restoring heritage and in kind of like material interventions at the architectural scale. I've been interested, as Chris mentioned, I'm super excited about robotic arms as a disembodied tool for fabrication. And recently, so my research has been, was at least during my doctoral times, very theoretical, like based on methods and thinking about material agencies. And recently, through the use of artificial intelligence, image generation, I was super excited to be able to generate some of those visions, really thinking about spaces of occupancy shared between humans and machines and robots. And so generating these kind of high resolution sketches helped me, keep thinking about how these topics can unfold in the future as well. I know, like, we are in this amazing group called D, so I expect all of you to be super excited, and probably all of you have tried artificial intelligence in one way or another. There are some tools that really now have already become best practice in the classes I teach, in the work I do, in the collaborations I carry out with my colleagues and with my friends. especially focusing actually on all of those listed, starting from large language models and then algorithms for and systems and platforms for image generation up to every possible experimentation with video and 3D modeling. And really, this opens up so many possibilities, but also so many questions. And I kind of want to share some of those questions with you, and hopefully that would be the base for, you know, a conversation across different systems of thinking. For sure, you know, everything started, at least for me, in 2022 with the widespread availability of Midjourney. A lot happened since February 2022. Just thinking about how the kind of resolution of this type of typology of platform for creating images really improved over time, thinking about how the same prompt was interpolated over different issues, versions of the software. And so this really, and not only that, right, like at the very beginning, not only architects, designers, but really teachers started asking questions of like, how do we frame what we're seeing? How do we kind of like embed those new possibilities in a kind of like educational context, in our pedagogical approaches? And starting from the fact that now we are rethinking the way we generate content, we generate ideas, and imagining kind of these processes as kind of like a loop of curation of large quantities of data that are generated through different kind of inputs, right? Starting from text prompts or AI-generated images or photos or any kind of material that we can kind of like curate and select and sample to pursue a certain kind of vision, right? Because this is, at the end of the day, what we are able to create through image generation, kind of like disconnected visions that then we can connect to sort of create a logic behind it. For sure, Midjourney, I'm using that extensively, especially in my design studios, and trying to experiment also as much as possible with stable diffusion because there's those are like because those allow us to think about different ways of connecting input and output, right? So thinking about how a text prompt can allow for kind of like an immediate generation of an outcome versus kind of a system of data containers that work in an input-output logic very similar to Grasshopper, allow you to have to kind of like interact with the kind of this AI definition in every single step. So like going back and forth between those two systems, I think is very productive to like if in the sense that we can continue to have like kind of like awareness of all the steps, not only that, but also how the platforms are evolving and improving and what are the new functions and how we can react to some of that. At the very like early stage, again, you kind of had a sense that I have a certain interest in a certain kind of aesthetics, thinking about machinery as relics, like this idea of like robotic archaeology, this idea of projecting tools of making into the future embedded with traces of culture, material culture. I talked about that as collective heritage. So this is oftentimes my starting point to understand the tools, to understand the methods. So very early stage experimentation on that maps to understand how to start transforming two-dimensional images to kind of start to obtain an entity that is in between 2D and 3D. Is actually the 2.5D space, I think, is a very interesting spatial kind of condition that allows you to interact a lot with the process, to kind of like guide the definition of any kind of result we can think about and we're looking for. More of this. Transformation from 2D and 3D, starting from an image, creating all the kind of like computational entities that are required to be able to really manipulate form, to kind of like set the basis, right? That can be an image that comes from a number of prompts, that comes from the process, like the one that we saw before, that is kind of like a scheme of iterations through kind of choices that we make in sequence to obtain finally an image that is the result of a number of steps that again can be addressed in different directions, based also on the possibilities that evolve day by day, especially because teaching with AI and experimenting since day one really allowed me to, or actually like offers interesting challenges, because sometimes you have to adjust the approach or to change the assignments, or to tweak certain things because the platform changes, or like a number of new functions are available, or there's like a kind of like a completely different quality in the generation of the images, and for sure. And I'll frame, I just want to go through a few possibilities, because when we have the overview of what's possible, or at least what are the things I'm interested in, I'll show you how I kind of frame the use of these tools when it comes to studio teaching, really, when it comes to thinking about space and human space interaction in any kind of design project. So a number of amazing platforms are now available that can interpolate text or images to generate videos. And this idea that how like that there is a possibility to connect different platforms in what I call a kind of like a multi-format way of sketching, because right now we are in the condition in which we are generating high-resolution images immediately, quickly, through very quick iterations, generating a high quantity of data, but what those images actually are sketches, right? So like how, again, like how do we approach this condition in which we get to something specific very quickly, and so it's all about like iterating on the same kind of type of visual context, so to speak. We have passed, like the phase from search to sorting data. And right now, data is getting more and more just like widespread, and like to a certain extent also fragmented across different platforms. And then that also becomes like an important part in the conversation, how to use data, how to understand data sets, how to create your own, and how to go back and forth in the realm of like being a user, like as designers are, when it comes to software, like the use of software for 3D modeling, or direct modeling, parametric modeling, but at the same time try to understand really a little bit of behind the scenes, and try to have agency in all the steps possible of the creative generation. So a little bit of premise, and we can have a conversation about that later. I'm sure that most of you have used most of those tools. But I can share some first-hand experience, because right now I'm in Italy. I took with me some co-ed students from Lawrence Tech. and they are interacting with master students from my alma mater, the University of Ferrara, which is a university that has a extremely different approach to everything, to creativity, to design. And so has been interesting these days to kind of put in communications students with completely different knowledge and backgrounds when it comes to the use of these technologies, which I guess it was the point of of this whole operation. But then it was very like revealing to see how, you know, at least being at Lawrence Tech, I just gave it for granted that everyone is like super excited about AI and using extensive AI as a tool for productivity and exploration, while there are other groups of people who are reluctant or scared, or they're, I guess, not ready to join the conversation. So that was interesting. I just want to share with you where I am in a beautiful post-industrial neighborhood. Those are my students, Dane, Sam, Autumn, and Zara, trying to understand with the other Italian folks how to kind of activate an adaptive reuse project and a renovation process for this warehouse that comes from the post-war kind of era. And how to integrate tools for quick ideas generation, since we are trying to kind of define proposals over the course of 3 days. And so here are some of the methods, really, just thinking about how many workflows or like how many workshops have been through, and thinking about, you know, like what kind of materials you develop, what are the deliverables, what are the intentions, and kind of like bypassing some of those steps, because now we are really at a point in which if we have a very simple massing model, or even like if we have like, we could even start from like the documentation of the site, from like photographies that we take on site, we can directly translate some texturing and start to kind of react directly to a reality that has more tactile qualities, so to speak. So the image to the left is actually an AI image. So there was we have spent some time doing some skill building to try to understand the technologies. And I have to say, in this couple of days, it was really amusing to see students using AI for the first time and seeing, you know, like the process of image generation. And so like talking together about workflows and how to optimize this kind of processes. So here, just an example of how we are operating within this context. Starting from simple model, or starting from photographies of, in this case, of the warehouse of the site, texturing the model, and then generating images, and then blending the ideas with kind of the structure of the context, right? So that we start visualizing, and we are responding to a number of quick sketches, quick ideas that also facilitate the conversation again between students, you know, that have already like a kind of like a language barrier, but also a background barrier, again, in the context of AI and the use of AI. And so just to, you know, to make sure that we're all aware of the possibilities over here, we're generating visions for the space. Of course, we're going through all the diagrammatic phases, all the, you know, like what is a concept, like we're being very methodical in understanding those things, because the question that I these days that I keep getting is like, so now what? This changes everything, right? And just to kind of communicate the fact that it's not an either or, like now we have an amazing tool that we can integrate as needed, but of course in a kind of like short workshop, we want to explore as much as possible. So now we are generating visions that are kind of highlighting different kind of quality, a different kind of like activation of the space, really seeing what life, social life could look like in this kind of post-industrial context, and even thinking about like what the events could look like, the different kind of interactions. What's a term that keeps coming back these days is the word atmosphere, right? So this is sometimes like actually is what we try to convey through high resolution renderings. So now what happens when an atmosphere is actually a short clip that is like the transformation of a high resolution sketch, which is an AI image. So it's really intense times for having those conversations and as I mentioned before, of course we're sketching, of course we're looking into those things, but at the same time we're using this as an opportunity also to talk about, to expand on the terminology that we're using, right? Like what's a trained data set, what's a platform, what's a prompt, what does it mean to blend two images, what does it mean to do other things to describe an image, so on and so forth. And so in this case, starting from the only like actual sketch is the one on the top left. That then we kind of transform into two different typologies of image, a more like advanced AI sketch and higher resolution sketch / rendering that were realized based on basically two different LoRa's. So two different mood boards. That's how they're called now in the browser version of Midjourney. Generating or finding or selecting images that capture a certain atmosphere, certain style, and activating those mood boards to be able to generate completely different effects, starting from the same input. Same kind of thing as I was mentioning before, or like what happens, or like what's the evolution of Midjourney and image generation with Midjourney using the same prompt over the versions and over the months and over the years. So there's that. Some tools, some exciting possibilities, some just opportunities for thinking really. Again, multi-platform, multimedia kind of generation of outputs. But recently I really wanted to think about this ecosystem, those possibilities in the context of a design studio. So I want to share with you the work that is in progress actually from this semester from my advanced design studio that I'm teaching in the graduate program that focuses on the adaptive reuse and renovation of a beautiful office building downtown Detroit. Is a Buell building, thanks to a collaboration with Bedrock Detroit. And thinking about really a design studio allowed me to spend some time really framing the topic, really framing what's meaningful about, iterating with artificial intelligence as a collaborator for design thinking. So the first thing that came to mind is theory from Luigi Moretti. That was, in the 50s was talking about architecture as kind of like a spatial condition that needs to be understood in relationship with time. And so architecture as a sequence of spaces, actually a succession of visions. And I thought that was interesting just in terms of the nature of AI image generation, that we could argue that generates kind of fragments, like snippets of visions, ideas that kind of like belong to a certain ideal, not really contextualized, but like imaginative space and a certain imaginative time. So what happens, or actually what's our role, right? Like, can we envision our role as the kind of storytellers and integrators who are able to make connections between those fragments of life, fragments of concepts and ideas? And so just starting to think about everyday life, right? So what happens when we enter our homes? I was interested in exploring an idea of domesticity. So the adaptive reuse of the office building is actually for collective living kind of entity or program. And so imagining, right, like our experience when we enter our homes and this idea of like sequences of like fragments of visions, because we never really kind of understand spatially a whole building sometimes, especially if we live in a condo. And or what happens in the other apartments, we have no clue about the other spaces around our own space of domesticity. And so can we design, just taking into considerations those visions and that kind of like cinematic and kinematic approach to what we see around us. So my friend Lisu, kind of like sharing some statements here about some of the software programs that we are excited about using in our lives as designers, as architects, but also as a critique of, this idea of very efficient, hyper coordinated drawings that are comprehensive and controlled, that need to be completed or carried out through a very precise sequence of operations. So how can we, like counterbalance this kind of contemporary condition of architects and trying to see if we can just, let's say, open up a space for debate when it comes to these kind of relationships. So I think I'm going to share that slide at every funnel review, because I think that everyone is like starts thinking about their approach to design and interaction with software programs. But again, as I was mentioning before, I'm very much interested in, world building and thinking about how do we even teach really imagination, because this is, I guess, a current emerging issue. When you can create anything, what do you do? Where do you start, right? And so thinking about educators, again, having the role of like setting the boundaries and setting the framework, the constraints to kind of initiate a discourse and frame something through a method, right? Where like things are connected, and if you're creating a stories, like all the parts together make sense, they're not fallacies, and we can make sense, and we can create a reality that is three-dimensional, so to speak, right? So you're thinking about space and time and the evolution of society, the evolution of the environment. And so something that I'm very interested in is to challenge students to think about future scenarios, because they can start predicting or like thinking about some patterns or some trends that might repeat themselves or they might occur in the future. And so the framework that I gave them is kind of a condition in which in the future, we as collective reality in the world, somehow we need to figure out how to live together and potentially also how to move together, given, climate related crises that might occur in the future, that are occurring right now in the present. But then, so can we use this as a starting point to generate thinking, to generate a story? Again, not to get lost in any possible concept that potentially could get developed through this logic. So I'm trying out some things. And I really, behind the scenes, I really wanted students to learn all the tools that I mentioned before at the beginning. So how to approach large language models, how to understand text, the use of natural language to construct an effective prompt, how to carefully select the words, how to put them in the right sequence with a hierarchy of information, right? There's like all those things that now are becoming very, very important. How do you describe a scene, how you talk about a project, how you know, like you're very intentional about mentioning or not mentioning a specific precedent or an architect or a style. So how can we really envision ourselves as poets who really, really need to pick carefully the words? So that's kind of like the overall overarching idea. But so yeah, sorry, I was I was saying like I really wanted them to learn prompting, large language models, image generation, video generation, obviously. But how do we connect all of those things? So first idea was really to think about ChatGPT as a resource for generating chatbots that can communicate with us. And those chatbots could be clients, right? Kind of like synthetic clients or personas that we can interact with to really to initiate a conversation and to generate ideas. And in the same logic, we kind of react to a high resolution rendering or like high resolution sketch when we create an AI image. We can do the same with text as well, right? So how can we develop different personas with different characteristics, with different backgrounds, right? So we are starting to generate our world. And can we make sure we kind of like pick the extremes so we differentiate the personas enough so that we can kind of like respond to points of view that maybe intuitively would not be the first thing we would think about, right? Or like the first kind of like the design design needs also that we would think about as a starting point in our design process. So I thought that that was really constructive as a way to, you know, situate the idea, the framework of the project. We do have a site, but also to think about the personas that would interact in our collective living space of the future, because that allows also to make more connections with a sense of domesticity, because I think that, or at least that was actually, I speak for my own experience, even as an architecture student, that oftentimes in my design, in the design studios I took, I focused on kind of on the volume of the building, of like volumetric connections between spaces, but I really like maybe not necessarily I zoomed into kind of the qualities of the materials, or like really thinking carefully about the atmosphere of working space, or in this case of a domestic space that is shared, right? And I told the students that could decide in which way the space could be shared. And so some of those possibilities, right? So how can we generate a concept? How can we even like think about new type of outcomes or design outputs that can emerge, or kind of new kind of diagramming that we can think of by using AI image generation. And as I showed in the case of the workshop I'm teaching these days, how to start from some base material and start constructing kind of the geometry of an image, right? What are kind of like the parts that become being the reference for like the idea, the iteration of ideas, and how do we take it from there? So how do we add resolution? How we go back and forth between like the mood boards, and then blending, and then text inputs, and then at the end think about this kind of outcome as a multiplicity of outcomes. Really, I've always been fascinated by the theory of the objective, Bernard Cash, thinking about how a parametric model is one thing and multiple things at the same time, right? Thinking about like all the kind of parameters embedded in a 3D model. And I think that we're really kind of simplifying the concept a little bit, but we're seeing some of that right now in the context of AI, in which since we can structure an image and we can define the process and we can train certain visuals, and we can control the outputs, right? Why kind of converging into one final hero image instead of just embracing quantity or embracing variations and embracing this kind of AI objective that I think has potential just to become like part of the representation in the same way we just know that to communicate architecture and to communicate those kind of notations, we use floor plans, elevation sections. And this is another example of another group of students from my advanced design studio. They really try to combine and try to push as much as possible those possibilities and to, how do we make the connection, right? Like at the end of the day, we created all the drawings and the different renderings and the GIFs that kind of activated, I'm not saying the space, but maybe an idea of texture and materiality. So one of the requests and one of the assignments was to generate a video as a type of outcome that kind of narrates the story of the project, right? And I want to show you some of that. It's kind of like the first iteration of this kind of work. I think it's naive, but it's a lot of fun. And again, I thought that was interesting experimentation to think about a point of connection between all those kind of fragmented aspects that you are seeing on the screen, right? So again, all the drawings and the idea of the kind of starting point from the Arctic model to the textured model to the more elaborated model. Some students also started translating 2D images into simple 3D models. But then at the end, I want to share with you some of the stories.
The morning light shifts across the walls, tracing over cracks and textures. The city hasn't woken up yet, but I have.
And really asking students to think about their personas, to envision the way they interact with each other. For some reason, there's espresso in all of those videos. I might have influenced some of the idea generation.
At some point, we stopped questioning it. It's just part of the space now, like the rest of us. The garden isn't neat, but it grows. Some things push through on their own. Others need more care. Stone holds its own time.
So how can we connect the fragments and really
and holding the weight of years.
with the effort of
take patience to understand.
like really zooming into the space, into the domesticity, into the like interaction between humans and objects and humans and the atmosphere.
Everything in here was
in this attempt of like really trying to construct a logic of world building.
It all came from somewhere. Knowledge isn't fixed here. Words shift, projections flicker, and what you remember might not be what was written.
And everything has been generated with AI, so
even the stone feels
the images generated in Midjourney were transformed into short video clips using Sora in the kind of pro version of ChatGPT. And then combined and assembled, and even the voiceover is an AI bot that followed the script. I have another short one that I would like to show you. Just again as a way to envision an atmosphere and to communicate the project in a, I guess I keep calling it a tactile way.
Hey Aura, activate my
but just I think incredible that those videos were generated over the course of 2 weeks, starting from scratch. So this also tells the story of like the accessibility of those tools and how the platforms are user friendly and accessible, and like using creative design approach that we can we can
My
combine a
sanctuary.
concept, right? Like
Softest
through
sheets,
this
perfect
method.
lighting, a space that understands me. Laughter, strategy, playful competition. It's their moment, their bond. This is home. And tomorrow, I'll be ready to take on the world again.
So we've been having some fun this semester with those. We are still experimenting. We're trying to push as much as possible now that we are approaching the final reviews. But I also wanted to share the fact that at the College of Architecture and Design, we make things. And I was fortunate enough to teach a prototyping and fabrication class for a few years. Using a number of fabrication tools, I get particularly excited about robotics. And even in the past few years, the way I kind of, together with the students, I used robotic fabrication and I adjusted the workflows also in response to AI. I think it was super exciting. And to me, it's always kind of like a moment of reflection and interesting point of observation to try to see, like, as the technology evolves, like how certain things can be immediately embedded in the assignments in the course of any semester. Here, for instance, exploring the use of ChatGPT to kind of, and we were still using the 4.0 release version, just to kind of create instructions on how to assemble a grasshopper definition. Because our sophomore students, they all learn how to use grasshopper, and sometimes it's kind of difficult to convey the message that it's really this input-output kind of system. In reality, is a logic system in which, like, you follow one sequence after another to kind of like, and those sequences you could almost like explain them verbally, right? Like I create a form, like I create a point, and then a number of points, I connect them. I extrude the line, the curve, and then I cap the solid, and so on and so forth. So all those things through simply through ChatGPT started to be a little bit of support for students approaching those parametric design for the first time. But for me, it was really revealing the use of AI for simple robotic interactions in one of the assignments that really is now state of the art in any school. It means taking long exposure photos of a robotic arm following a tool path and using the small LED light as an end effector. And over the years, I've always seen, students experimenting with direct modeling, so creating points in space or lines in space and focusing a lot on like the geometry and geometry making, and trying also to make an effort to use Grasshopper to generate kind of like a parametric three-dimensional entity. But then recently my students experimented with the generation of code using ChatGPT, Python code. And so the search, or like the design approach changed completely, because in this case, students were focused on finding equation, mathematical functions to kind of describe complex systems. So another instance in which the conversation shifts or kind of like orients in different directions because of the interaction with the tool at that specific point in time. Again, we're talking about undergraduate education, entry-level kind of, or like introductory courses to workflows, fabrication, parametric design. So examples in which we use hot wire cutting to make models and make simple diagrams. Imagine this as a 2-week assignment. I always describe this as a as the generation of proto-architectural forms that then with the use of AI can become something, again, that gets a little bit more precise, more detailed, closer to a early stage idea of architecture. So, you know, like, can we assign more meaning to those sketches? Because at the end, we can call sketch the proto-architectural model, the simple line work, and then the AI images, and going back and forth between digital and physical, but also between image and 3D models. So right now there are a number of platforms that are becoming available, like Viscom, to create 3D models starting from two-dimensional image. More of this. So if the the input is simple enough, could be a drawing, could be the photography of a model, could be simple line work. And so to me is really about the process, is about learning certain kind of literacy, technological literacy, to be able to not only to use those tools, but to be users and not unusers, and also to be able to detect when something is being generated through artificial intelligence, because then it gives you that kind of intelligence of like you're training your eye to kind of see patterns and see kind of recurring situations that are created through the use of these algorithms. And then from there, you can branch out in a number of ways. You can think about blending forms that don't necessarily belong to each other, or start to create those misfits that sometimes are happy accidents, but are, I think, always an opportunity to think about space, to think about tectonic systems, or just to start reacting to materials and to more complex ideas at very, very early stage of design. So I love the concept of speaking machine, of understanding computation in the sense of like a complex system that connects areas of knowledge. And this applies also to other kind of experiments that are maybe more focused on storytelling and world building, but I think are still valuable to think about the way we observe reality and we absorb it and we use it for our creative practice. So I also want to share with you some examples from the roaming around class. Is a travel experience with Dean Dubman at the college. We take students to Rome every spring break, and we have decided to really embrace AI to create a design fiction sketchbook over the course of a week. And obviously, these evolved, from a more like typical grand tour kind of approach of visiting spaces, visiting places, and reading about those sites and capturing them through diagrams, which is an important exercise. There's no doubt about it. But I think especially, again, is autobiographical experience, but like over the course of a week, moving around the city, going quick from one side to another, right? Like we required students to sketch what they saw and diagram the reality around them. But then when we had to move quickly from one place to another, they would take out their phone, take a photo, right? And so then think about diagramming the space through a digital media. And so we thought, why not, creating ideas that are natively digital and create the framework for them to imagine, like in this case, a Baroque version of the she-wolf, ideally, in a parallel world designed and built by Bernini. And those are ideas that were generated while we were in Galleria Borghese, looking at Bernini sculptures and imagining how that kind of thinking could expand beyond their direct experience. Coming back to, perspective of a teacher, we used Midjourney in Discord, And we thought that that was a pretty effective way of sharing knowledge, because by creating a server, all the students had access to each other's iterations. And also us as teacher, we could interact with them and help upscale images and make variations or drop notes. And what was actually super fun and super interesting is that while we were talking with them, they would take notes. And those notes became the prompts. So as a really like way of like envisioning space and iterating on ideas, we thought it was a pretty powerful method for sharing ideas. And something else I was really excited about is that after seeing so much, I thought that all the experiences started to blend, like quite literally in the memory, personal memory. But like in this way, instead, by keep using the prompts and going back and forth between the images and looking at the names of the churches and the sculptures, I thought that was an interesting exercise of like memorizing some of those things and some of the places we saw together as a group. I noticed also a tendency of, thankfully, diverging from cliches, right? Like before going to Rome, we meet with students, we have some skill building sessions, we learn how to prompt, we learn how to use AI, and the first reaction is always, Colosseum. We're going to Rome, we're going to see the Colosseum. But then really, and I'll take it as a win, after a week really looking at the transformation of those images and really capturing colors and atmosphere and the palimpsest of Rome and how the complexity of Rome really interact with people and with the monuments and with the everyday life. It's just like, it's beautiful to see all those ideas unfolding in such a few days, and looking at different kind of architectures and really envisioning life in those kind of spaces, right? So thinking about how we sample reality, how we capture even through digital photography, in this case, rationalist architecture, and then beautiful frescoes in the Chiesa di Sant'Ignazio, and then what the blend could look like, but also what's the meaning that we assign to that kind of outcome that comes from this process of observations. Envisioning more spaces. Oh, that's it. I thought I had more, but those are some ideas that also prompt questions about, how do we use those tools, and in particular, it was interesting, some of the ideas that are embedded in this book, co-intelligence, including the fact that we need to assume that AI will improve exponentially, continuously, and we experience that firsthand because especially on our second trip to Rome, while we were there, Midjourney updated from like version 3 to version 4, so meant that the images completely changed from painterly and abstract and imaginative to already very high detailed and realistic. So we had to react to that kind of shift and think about it. And again, that opens up other questions. What does it mean? And to generate something that is so high resolution? What were the possibilities before? What's coming next? How are we approaching the next future change? But also, what is creativity in the first place? Because artificial intelligence is also opening up other conversations. I feel that through this technological transformation, architects are having more conversations with poets, with philosophers, with experts of ethics, experts of psychology, ethnography. And I think that's really, really enriching the way we think spatially, really, and we think about people. And And so there's a whole ongoing conversation about creativity. What is it? Probably is a construct of our minds that we value a lot because we don't fully understand it. And it's interesting to see how, we value a lot the outcomes of a culture and the outcomes of collective creativity and collective efforts. But if we really zoom out on the artifacts that us as humanity have created over the centuries, we can really see patterns that can be described almost algorithmically. But for us, it's still, it's not about like how, geometries change over time, say from the Renaissance to Baroque and the neoclassical, but it's really how those things are connected to culture. And we know that AI generation or AI, artificial intelligence in general, or the tools that architects use is contextless. And so how do we situate it, right? And so how do we situate it through thinking about the adaptive reuse of an existing building or an existing warehouse, or like situating it through an AI sketchbook in Rome, or at least that's the kind of my instinct of giving response to those questions. And we obviously we can discuss about that, but for sure, we are very much in the present, and we are in the midst of all of this. And there are many ways in which us at the college, but also organizations worldwide are continuing the conversation around these topics and celebrating AI. This is one exhibition that I curated alongside Carl Ratti in 2023 for the Detroit Month of Design. And thinking about the future of mobility, the future of Detroit, and with an open call for AI images that are really allowed us to be part of this conversation really, and to generate visions and to think about mobility, to think about the city, and to think about future possibilities at large. And more recent project, design build project downtown Detroit, constructing futures, kind of same approach with a more kind of like celebratory installation to think about visions related to the future of making, the future of construction, the future of the manufacturing or implementing skills as it relates to the building site, or in general collective efforts for taking care of the built environment. And the same kind of approach. So it was super exciting also to tie a number of events also in response to some of the amazing visions that we received through that call for images. And some of my personal work was recently exhibited at Pratt. And so another moment of just, of reflection, and to see where we're going, and to keep celebrating kind of like the collective effort in asking questions, and collaborating and discussing really what's next and how to approach the future challenges. More of my work, you can kind of see my robotic explorations, but also my mobility explorations in the imaginative future of Detroit, and more of this soon in a project that will be exhibited at the Venice Biennale in May. That it's kind of like another moment of reflection in which all these ideas come together in a workflow that connects some of those dots. And this is all I had for you guys today. And thank you so much for being here again.